So hopefully you got a chance to think about those questions, and I think a lot of you would agree that they're very interesting questions. And I think you'll see that that's why I like Erickson's theory of psychosocial development, because he says that each one of those 8 questions that I just answered, that I just asked you, he said that those answers must be met during development. So what his theory does is he was a Freudian, but he disagreed with Freud. Freud was Freud's theory of psychosexual development. And Erickson, he liked Freud's theory, but he said, I think Freud places too much emphasis on sex. I think that there might be a different way to go about this. And so he says that basically at each phase in life that we have a conflict that we must resolve. And if we resolve the conflict on the positive side, then we have a healthy personality. If we resolve the conflict on the negative side, then we have an unhealthy personality. So if you remember what I was talking about at the beginning of this, is I said I think the greatest gift that we can give to our children is the ability to love themselves. And I believe that the only way that we can give them that gift is if we love ourselves. And so if we're reading this theory of psychosocial development and we find out that we have resolved things on a lot of negative sides, on the negative side, then maybe it's before we have children, before we're ready for a committed relationship, maybe it's time to work on some of these places. So let's start. The first one, from 0 to 1, this is the age group from 0 to 1. You're going to have to write that in because I didn't put it on the slide. I guess that I could write it in this way. I could go 0 to 1. Um, this is the time period when the child's brain is in a state that it's learning to trust, because the child is helpless. It can't, for the first few months of life, it can't move, it can't do anything. All of its needs must be met by another human being. So Erickson says it's at this time of life that the child is making the decision. Can I trust others, rely on others to meet my need, or am I always going to have like this sense of mistrust? So if you look at it, if the child doesn't have lots of anxiety in the first year of life where its needs are being met, then maybe that's structuring the brain to be not such an anxious person. But if the child's needs are not being met and they're experiencing a lot of anxiety during the first year of life, then probably their brain may be set up in a way that they become anxious and very mistrustful of people. So that's where it's coming in. So this notion of, sometimes you get this from the nurses in the hospital, and I know some of these things that I'm going to say are going to maybe go against what some of you have been taught throughout your family. And again, I want to reiterate the point. I don't think there's any right way to raise a child. I'm going to state my views here, and if you disagree with them, then I'm all for it. I'm totally with this program of just do the best that you can. Just love your child. But some people are told, don't pick up the baby because you're going to spoil the baby. Well, the problem that I have with that is, one, is I don't think the child is developed enough to sit there and say, huh, let me control mom. I think that if we all picture ourselves just laying there with nothing to do, I think a lot of us could see that we'd like to be picked up. We'd like to be stimulated visually. We'd like to be touched emotionally. I think that's a basic need. And so for the first year of life, I don't think it's possible to spoil a baby. And I always get into this discussion with my class. When you guys say somebody is spoiled, what are you saying? I think what you're telling me is you're telling me that the child has no manners. Okay? Because a lot of you say, well, they think that they get rights to everything. And I say, well, how do you know that? And it's their behavior. So I think when a lot of people are saying the child is spoiled, what they're saying is they're saying that the child has not been taught manners. So picking up the baby, stimulating the baby, I really don't think that you're going to spoil the baby. Psychology does not support that. They say absolutely a baby cannot be spoiled for the first year of life. So maybe just do the best that you can. Now, if sometimes the babies just cry and cry and cry. And I think that we're going to find out that there's different parenting styles, but what psychology believes the best parenting style is a parent that balances their own needs with the child's needs. And so I think the parents can do as much as they can to a point, but if the baby's crying, 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 it's driving the parents out of their mind. Maybe it's okay to stick the baby in a crib and just let the baby cry itself to sleep. If the parent wants to sleep with the baby, then go ahead and sleep with the baby. Now, the pediatrics, American Pediatrics, is going to advise against that because they're going to say you could smother the baby. So you're going to have to decide what you want to do. But basically, I think if you have your child's best interest in mind and you do the best that you can, then you should meet their needs of trust versus mistrust. Okay, let me go to this pointer options again. Okay. So from autonomy versus shame and doubt, this is the time period which is 1, 2, 3. And this is the time, sorry, when the child can now walk. So they can walk at about 1 year. And once they can walk and they can start moving around, basically they're trying to do things themselves. Now, however, their brain is not developed enough that they can control their reactions. So, for example, if the child is trying to feed itself and it's like 1, then a lot of mothers maybe in this class or a lot of you would know that when they try to feed themselves, they make a mess. Whenever they try to do anything, they make a mess. And it's very easy for a parent to get very upset and say, oh my gosh, give that to me. But really, when we think about it, when the mom grabs the spoon out of the baby's hand, the message that she's giving to the baby is, you can't do this. And so the baby feels lots of shame and doubt. And when the baby goes and touches something and breaks it because it's so beautiful or something, and the mom gets so upset, then the baby's experiencing a bit of shame and doubt. So there was this famous scientist, I can't remember what he discovered, but I remember this story, and I always thought that this mom was like an angel. I mean, when I think about this mom, I think she's the greatest. I wish I could emulate her, but I know that I don't even come close a lot of times with my own children. Anyway, the scientist was being interviewed of how he came up with this idea. And they asked him, well, what about your childhood? Did you have something special happen in your childhood that allowed you to be so creative and so great in the science world and so on and so forth? And the guy said, yeah, I had the greatest mom in the world. In fact, I remember when I was 3 years old, and I know you're not supposed to remember when you're 3 years old, but I think it was around 3 years old that I learned everything that I needed to know about science. And the reporter said, really? What happened? Tell me about it. He said, well, I went to the refrigerator to get some milk, but the milk carton was high and it had the condensation on it. And so when I went to get it out of the refrigerator, it came crashing to the floor and it spilled all over. Now my beautiful mom came in and she said, oh my, what a beautiful mess you've made. And she got down on her hands and knees and we started writing the alphabet in the spilled milk, and we started making little milk snakes, and we made clouds, and we just played in the spilled milk. But then after a while my mom came to me and she said, okay, now which would you rather do? Would you rather clean it up with the sponge or would you rather clean it up with the rag? And I think I remember cleaning it up with the rag. And so I would go and pick it up with the rag, and then she would go and wring it out, and I would pick it up with the rag and I would wring it out, and that. Now, this is me talking here. Is in and of itself, that sounds great because I know me as a mom, when my kids make a mess, a lot of times I'm just like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? So frustrated. But this mom was a mom from heaven. So the guy went on to go to the rest of the story. As he said, but then after we cleaned up the mess, my mom filled the milk carton with water, and she took it outside in the backyard, and she stacked some books up on a picnic table, and she put the milk carton up there, and she goes, now you go practice getting that milk carton, and then you're going to bring it over to this side of the yard and pour the drinks. And so he said, I learned everything that I needed to know about science. As I learned, 1, it's okay to make mistakes, and you can even have fun with mistakes and learn from your mistakes. 2, you must always be responsible for your mistakes and clean them up. And 3, practice makes perfect. So this is the kind of story that I can tell you for autonomy versus shame and doubt. Is maybe when I was telling that story, a lot of you were going, I've heard it many times in my classes where they say, oh my God, who has time for that? I understand that. I completely understand that. It's exhausting to be a parent. However, remembering to teach the children you can do it, you can do it, you can do it at a very early stage may be very helpful to the children, and realizing that, okay, they're going to make messes because their brain is not developed, but I'm still going to encourage them to realize what a wonderful person they are.